Hey everyone, Eugene here. Hope you're all well. Joined today by my lovely wife, Maria.
Hello.
She finally offered to do up a video with me, so I kind of gave her the option. What do you want to do? Some of your signature perfumes, or like some of my subscribers have been asking to discuss more about fragrance addiction. And I kind of knew which you would choose because you're more on the intellectual side than just surface topics. So Maria does have a little bit of background in addiction. Do you want to go ahead and tell us, something about yourself? Or
Sure. Well, my very first program in school was for a social worker, and so I have a bachelor's in social work, and I specialized in mental health. And so, through going through school and also like working in the field, I just have been exposed to all sorts of addictions, but also addictions runs quite heavily in my family on various levels. And so, we talk about addictions all the time. So when he told me, he kind of mentioned it in one of his videos, and people were really open to wanting to discuss it more. I thought, sure, why not? We'll talk about it.
Right. So, for me, it's a perfume addiction. Clearly, it's out in the open. It's not a secret. But an addiction is an addiction, is it not? Like, be it drugs or alcohol, is it all kind of the same thing?
Yeah, I think oftentimes people, when they think of addiction, they think of alcohol, drugs, sex addiction, gambling, and oftentimes not even so much the sex addiction or shopping addiction or perfume addiction, but at the end of the day, they all have the same impact on that person, whether it is a financial impact, whether it's an impact in terms of their home life, their interactions, what kind of relationships they have. Oftentimes the family dynamics is impacted regardless of what kind of addiction it is. So yeah, it is. It's all the same. The symptoms are all the same.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because you obviously have a background and you're educated in addictions, but you're also the spouse of a fragrance addict, and that's kind of what my channel is all about, is perfume. So what would you say are some of the telltale signs of, if you either want to get into some signs that you've noticed me or
yeah,
caught me in, or just specifically in general, what are some of the signs that you should look out for or that you've seen?
Okay, so before I go into it, I want to say and make it very clear that I never ever thought in my lifetime that I would be in a relationship with someone that had an addiction of any sort because of my experiences as a child. My family, on my mom's side of the family, have heavy addiction, so heavy alcohol and drug addiction. My mom struggles with it still to this day. And I always, as I grew into a young woman, even in my teenage years, I stayed away from men and friends that drank a lot, did drugs. It was never my thing, just because of how it impacted me and my childhood and also growing up. So I had a lot of insecurities around that, and I made a point to stay away from men that had very apparent addictions, whether that would be a sex addiction or an alcohol addiction or a drug addiction. And so when I met Eugene, he's kind of clean as a whistle. He's very square, as I say. Neither of us really drink. I think we can count how many drinks we have on our just one hand a year. So I thought I was good and in the clear. And when he embarked on this whole, I called it a hobby in the beginning, of collecting perfume, it became quite clear very on that there was possibly maybe a problem there. And it didn't, I don't know, how long have you been doing this for now?
2011.
Yeah, so 7 years have passed by, and his collection has grown significantly. And yeah, there is a lot of changes that I see in him on an individual level, and then also how it impacts us in a family setting. So okay, so the first one that sticks out is going to be disengaged. So oftentimes, because of his passion about perfume, he's really disengaged in our home setting. And so I can be talking to him, our kids can be talking to him, and it just kind of flies over his head, which doesn't feel the greatest. And we've talked about this, often. I still talk about it to this day. Being on the phone. The phone is a big one where he has his phone basically attached to him at all times, and I'm the complete opposite. Half the time I don't even know where my phone is. So to see him have his face in his phone all the time, for me, is very frustrating, because he's not present to what is actually going on around him. And oftentimes I will say to him, the people online, no offense to you guys in any way whatsoever, because it's not really about you, it's more about how
yeah, I kind of wanted to make that clear. Just because I have a problem and I'm a collector and passionate about perfumes doesn't mean everyone that collects perfumes is an addict. And
definitely not.
This doesn't go out to everyone. But, if you kind of see yourself similar to my shoes, maybe you have some issues as I do. I'm just now I'm just now starting to be able to open up and come to my wife and say, hey, listen, I think I have, this is more than just a hobby. This is kind of turning serious. And, I don't want to put everybody, I don't want to classify everybody as an addict, because this has been, a very fun and eye-opening a journey for me. It is kind of passionate and something new that I've never really experienced. So I have enjoyed it, even though it's gotten me into a little bit of trouble. So I just kind of wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah.
I don't want, to say that, oh, just because you're collecting, you got an addiction and you got a problem, you got to seek. You don't.
Absolutely.
This is my journey, and this is where I'm at right now. So
yeah, absolutely. And as I get kind of more into the things that separate, maybe perhaps just a character trait that someone may have of someone being really into social media and on their phone versus someone that actually has an addiction, you'll see that they kind of have different characteristics. But in the case for Eugene, being on the phone often is kind of just being, again, disengaged kind of with the family and what's going on. And I would say to him that, the people on your phone and that follow you on your, on your YouTube channel, yes, they're real people, but we're real. We're people that have to live with you each and every day. And so you have to take care.
You're the people that matter and are important in my life.
And not that you guys don't matter. I know that you guys do matter, and I know his channel is very important to him, but oftentimes I think we as human beings, take for granted the people that are closest to us. Also, we have 4 boys that are growing, they're growing up quick, and they're now they're in their teenage years, and they're growing just so fast in front of our eyes. And I'm really, really afraid of kind of the impression that it's going to leave on our children as to, how Eugene is showing up as a father versus, him having this passion for perfume. It's not that. It's just wanting him to be aware of how his behavior is impacting us on a family level. But like I said, those may just be certain characteristics that people have, and you may have them, and that doesn't necessarily mean that there is an addiction. But with Eugene, it's a little bit different, because the one thing that would stand out the most to me is that anytime Eugene would go out and buy a perfume, there's a few things. So the first thing is he would hide it from me. He would be mailing his packages to his work, his parents' house. He would be picking them up from the stores, and he would think that I had no clue about it. But as you ladies know, we have eyes everywhere.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily that I would lie. Every time you've asked me, did you buy a perfume? I've never said no. I would say yes, but I would never come. Well,
what
not
you
never,
don't know
oftentimes,
doesn't hurt you
right.
is kind of the mentality that he would have. So if I didn't ask, let's just say he wouldn't tell.
Well, perfumes would oftentimes show up at the door. You know, it would be delivered to the mailbox, and you know, the post person actually had your phone number, and they would call you every single time there was a package. And I don't know if that was organized or planned or just happened that way. But
no, I just get a lot of packages that come to our house, and they don't fit in our mailbox. So that's why I love Amazon. But okay, so that would be one of the things. So it would be really frustrating because he knew that there's obviously with having a perfume fascination, that there's a financial aspect to that. I mean, a lot of these perfumes that he's buying are not cheap, and they add up. And so it started off being like, hey, you need to kind of be aware of how much money you're spending. And that would just be the conversation, because when you're taking money and putting it towards this passion of yours, it's also pulling away from the family. But the other thing is, Eugene works pretty much 7 days a week. He works every single day. I don't know many people that do. And I would say to him things like, you know, well, if you kind of cut back on, you know, your expenses, you wouldn't have to work so much, or you could spend more time with us. And so that's kind of where it spread it off. But when I first came to the realization that there was an issue, something that was a little bit more deep, was when things were kind of maybe not perhaps going in the direction that Eugene wanted, or maybe emotionally he was kind of not too happy about something. Maybe it was, you know, not being satisfied at work, or kind of just hit into a slump. That's when I would see the perfume collection grow significantly. And so I shared with him that his emotions, whatever is going on inside of them, perfume is just kind of a band-aid solution. And so for the day, you know, he would get this brand new perfume and be super pumped about it. But then the next day he was left feeling the same way that he felt before he bought the perfume.
Yeah. I almost feel like, you know, my addiction, my perfume addiction kind of cycled with, you know, with misery. Here I am, I'd be at work all day, 7 days a week for these long hours. I'd buy a perfume, I'd buy another perfume, then I'd have to go back to work to pay for these perfumes,
yep.
And I'd be having to work these long hours.
Yep.
So it was just like this vicious cycle: perfume, work long hours, come home, be pissed off, be miserable, you know, how it is when you come home from a long day of work, just be on edge. So that's kind of like, it was a bad cycle.
It's a cycle that a lot of people live in, because I mean, I have a background in business, and that is the field that I work with. But ironically, you know, when I work with my clients, there are, I would say it's 90% mindset work and 10% business. And I see every single one of my clients kind of have this type of pattern. So they usually have some form of addiction. That, you know, Eugene's the first that I've seen with perfume. It's the first time I've experienced this.
That's what my therapist says as well. She's never ever heard of this.
Yeah, when we went, she was kind of shocked, didn't even know like what this was. But I mean, with my clients in particular, I would see a lot of food addiction. I've even seen addictions to the extreme of needing to go to the gym every single day, multiple times a day. And what it comes down to is that there is some kind of emotional turmoil brewing, you know, within. And a lot of times, we're just programmed as human beings to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And we're all wired this way. And when we start to get uncomfortable, that's when we're looking for outlets for things that make us feel better, whether that's food, sex, drugs, alcohol, online addiction. You know, now there's counseling for internet addiction, there's phone addiction. Yeah, you know, sex addiction. So there's so many different types of addictions out there, but they all have the same symptoms, right? There's cause and effect, and all of symptoms tend to look very similar. You know, it impacts the finances. on an emotional level, they're being impacted.
Relationship level.
The relationships with their kids are being impacted. It's also the same, like Eugene was saying, that same loop that you're on. You go from like being completely tortured to happy for a moment to being tortured again. And it's like this loop that you feel like you can never step off of.
For me, it was like the ultimate rush in a dopamine fix. Like I'd be at work and I'd be, kind of irritated, and I'm like, I feel like I'm in a slump. I need that fix, that dopamine. And as soon as I got that perfume, it was almost like my drug. Mm-hmm. Like neither of us do drugs, but for me it was like the ultimate rush.
Yep.
And that would last, 36, 48 hours. And that perfume would go in the corner of my cellar, and the cycle would start all over again. Now I got to search for a new one. What's the next one?
Yep.
What's, study, research, and then kind of hit this kind of bad patch, and then now I want that fix. Mm-hmm. I need that dopamine rush.
Yeah.
And that's kind of
and on the outside looking,
what I was looking for.
Yeah, and on the outside looking in, I felt like he wouldn't even care or notice if we were present, because that's how consumed and like just deep, like his own world. He was so absorbed into this world of perfume that no one around him like really mattered. That's how it felt to us. Not saying that that's necessarily the case.
Like you guys didn't really know what's going on inside of my head as well. But, I went to go see the therapist, and she told me addiction is almost like a severe form of OCD, because you're just kind of doing the same process over and over and over again. And I asked her, well, I love perfumes. It's a hobby. I love smelling perfumes and trying to discover what the author is trying to tell us. All I want to know is, how do I break free from purchasing so many perfumes? I don't want to throw perfumes out of my life. I just want to stop buying as many perfumes as I'm buying. And she basically told me, you need to get rid of all of the perfumes out of your life, sell them, declutter, remove the hoard. And for me, that was like, fuck you, that's not going to happen. And it was basically the last time I went there.
Right.
And I don't know. How do you feel about that? Like, what do you think?
Yeah. So I happen to like the therapist. We have a very similar background in schooling, but also her style and approach was very similar to how I dealt with, my own clients. And so, when I was in counseling, I already anticipated the things that she was pretty much going to say to us. And I think throwing out the perfume does nothing. Again, it's a band-aid solution. It's not really getting to the root cause as to why Eugene feels this unhappiness inside of him, why he feels, stagnant, why he feels how he feels inside, which is causing him to purchase the perfume in the first place.
Right, because ultimately perfume would just be replaced by something else.
It's just something else. I had a food addiction for a very long time. I never talk about this. This is probably the first time I'm ever actually addressing this publicly. And then a lot of people are like, what do you mean, food addiction? You're not overweight. And it has nothing to do with actually consuming the food.
You were never fat. It was a completely different food addiction.
I was never overweight. Growing up as a child, my mom was on government assistant. We didn't have a lot of food, and going into the fridge and seeing nothing was a regular thing. And we pretty much lived off of macaroni, food donations, Mr. Noodle, that type of stuff. And as I grew up into a grown woman, as I was able to buy my own things, I had to have a full fridge. It was psychologically, it gave me such severe anxiety and really brought up bad feelings inside when I would see my fridge completely empty. And so even though I was a single person and there was no possible way that I could actually consume that amount of food, it would be packed and I would end up throwing out hundreds of dollars of food every single week. And then when I met Eugene, he started.
So you want to just start that over because our camera stopped. So when you met me.
So when I met Eugene, I think he just thought I was absolutely crazy when our kids Well, I would let you explain it because
Yeah, we'd be driving home or we'd be anywhere and one of the kids would say, I'm hungry. And you'd immediately have to run and feed them, like be it at fast food or stop at the grocery store. I'm like, we'll be home in 20 minutes, but it still had this kind of trigger on you where you probably went back to your own childhood and you felt your own hunger pains.
Yep.
And you felt like any mother, to feed the child instantly.
Yeah, it triggered me because I constantly had a feeling of the hunger pain in your stomach, and I really knew what it meant to be hungry. So when I hear people saying I'm starving, I'm like, oh God, you have no idea.
And in contrast, by you spending money out for fast food, I'm thinking in my head, this is less money for me to buy perfume, right? As any, the resources have to come from somewhere. Get
out of here. But that's the type of addiction. I had a food addiction, and it carried on for a very long time. And I had to go to counseling, and I had a coach who was a food coach, and we would just talk about, the emotions around food, right? And it's kind of like what I do now of talking about the emotions around money with my clients. And it's so crazy how everything is feeling based. And so there is obviously something that is within Eugene that is causing the feelings that he has to feel, that he's feeling. And I have explained to him that buying perfume is just masking that. It's temporary happiness. It's a temporary solution. And I know feeling those feelings are sometimes uncomfortable. I get it. I've been there. It's very painful. Sometimes healing is very painful, but there is this beautiful light at the end of the tunnel once you get there. And I constantly explain that to him. So yes, it feels uncomfortable because you have to deal with perhaps something that you're not sure why you're upset. You're not sure why you're sad. You're not sure why you feel depressed. You're not sure why you don't feel motivated. And that requires work. That requires you digging deep and sometimes answering the questions that you don't want to ask. But ultimately, it's going to do you so much good. And so we're still kind of on this journey. He's still on this journey for himself. And I don't know how he feels.
I just kind of picture it's going to be for me a lifelong journey. I just don't need to buy as many perfumes. I've even kind of started selling off and trading some perfumes, which I've never really done before or cared to. But there's just so much stuff that I've purchased that I've never really even cared for. But just to fill that addiction, I ended up buying. And that probably explained why I have so many Le Labos. This is the first time I've actually admitting to that. But I guess, culling the collection is a place to start. But getting rid of my whole entire collection is never going to happen.
No, because I think there's nothing wrong with having this passion. I love it. I support it. And I've always made that very clear to him, because in the beginning when I would say something to him, I think he would take it as I didn't support his passion. And that's definitely not the case. I support what he does 100%. If he wanted to do this full time, make a living on it, great. I'm there with you. But there is a problem because he is triggered. And then once he is triggered, maybe he has a bad day at work, triggered. His default behavior is to go and to comfort himself. And I mean, all human beings will do that. And I'm just trying to show him that you have to understand, first of all, what your trigger point is, and then start creating new habits around that trigger and rewiring kind of how you think, right? And so it's not just with perfume, it's with food. I mean, there's so many things. We all have something that maybe we could kind of improve on, and sometimes we're on autopilot and we're not even thinking. What were we talking about the other night when we were going to watch a movie, and we were like, what's your first thing you do when you hit the couch?
Fart. No, okay. I don't remember this conversation.
He doesn't fart in front of me, trust me. He wouldn't be living right now. No, it was getting snacks.
Oh yeah, right.
It's so his default behavior when he sits down to watch TV is then he gets up 2 seconds later.
Actually, first I'll go downstairs and spray some perfume, even after you've begged me not to, because you don't like perfume in the evening time. And then I'll go get some ice cream or
Yeah, but your
whatever
default is like to literally hit the couch, and then he could be completely full, and we just have eaten a feast at his mother's house or at home, and then he still has that behavior where he hits the couch. Oh, I need a snack, and then he'll get up.
Bad habits,
right? So it's like, but that's what I'm saying. It's like that behavior that's autopilot. We're not thinking about it. We just get into this loop of doing that thing, and it's the same thing with addiction.
Being unaware.
Instead of saying, "Hey, there's actually something wrong here," you go through the emotion, and then, or you're triggered, and then there's that behavior that follows, and then there's let's talk about how you feel though after you buy perfume, because I think that's really important.
There's two emotions I feel. Number one is guilt, and like you said, I get that dopamine rush, and it's almost like I drank like 20 cups of coffee, and I'm like, I'm super excited.
Yeah.
But, also at the same time, I was like, okay, now I have to get this package inside the house. And how am I going to hide this from Maria? Or
see, he does hide it.
I don't want to face the consequences. I mean, even though
it's not really a consequence.
It's not a consequence, but it's just a guilt.
Yeah, it's more of him having to answer like, why? Like, why? Like, why are you doing what you're doing, right?
So unfortunately, my battery's going to die really soon. So just very quickly, there's something that you said to me, and I'd rather you explain it just because actually know what you're talking about. But when you have an addiction, you're actually creating a neurological pathway. Do you remember saying that? Or a faster, like a highway.
No, I was saying that a neural pathway. So when you're trying to create new behaviors or new beliefs around maybe habits that you've had, or basically the things that I do is affirmations, and that affirmations are the quickest way to creating these new pathways that basically are disrupting your old patterns and creating your new patterns. That's what it is.
So some of those could be what? Going to the gym?
Gym is a good one.
What else?
Affirmations, meditating. It's something I do religiously. Visualization, I would say, is the biggest thing. So if there's something a new behavior that you want to create for yourself, or a new habit, it's all about visualizing yourself. And I mean every single movement. So if you want to start going to the gym at nighttime, I would lay in bed and I would actually visualize each of those movements. Getting out of bed, putting on your socks, putting on your gym clothes, opening your car door, bringing your gym bag with you.
I just visualize going to the Guerlain boutique.
And he usually does.
Okay.
He visualizes, and then guess what? He proceeds to follow through, because your brain doesn't know the difference between visualization, whether something is real or whether it's fake. It just acts upon. And that is why.
Right.
So it's time to start visualizing some new stuff.
Okay, great. I want to thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
Even though we got kind of personal, not too personal.
That's okay.
But, if I have this addiction or this problem, I'm sure a lot of my viewers might have the same thing. If you do, feel free to let us know.
Yeah.
Or if you have any questions or comments or concerns.
I would love to see what people...
I guess I'll probably keep updating. Like, this is my channel. This is my journey. And, my taste and my thoughts that I'm sharing with my public here. So I guess I'll continue sharing what's going on in my life. And if there's anything you guys want to share or say, feel free to drop a comment down below.
Absolutely.
Or even wish Maria a happy 19th birthday, because today is her birthday. Anyway, I want to thank you all for watching, and we will see you again. And stop wearing shitty cologne.
Bye.